In this video, I'm going to explain the levels of organization in the human body, and then I'm going to explain the different types of tissues. So starting with levels of organization, remember this is like going from simple to more complex structures. It's kind of like starting with words, then we have sentences, then we have pages, and from that we will form a whole book. So in the levels of organization, we're going to start at the smallest or simplest level, which is going to be the chemical or molecular. And when we say that, we just mean, for example, molecules that are formed interacting from interacting atoms. We're going to have other complex proteins, fibers, right? So it's going to be, for example, DNA, small molecules, etc. Then we're going to go into the cell level, and in this we're going to combine all of these structures, molecules, DNA, compounds, and we're going to form a cell. For example, the cardiac muscle cell. Then when these cells combine together, we're going to form tissues. For example, in this case, cardiac muscle tissue. Then from tissues, when they combine together, we're going to form an organ. And when these organs combine together, we form an organ system. So in this case, the example of the organ is going to be the heart. And so together we're going to form the cardiovascular system, which is composed of blood vessels, the heart, and blood. At the very end, when we combine all of these organ systems, in total the human body has 11. It's going to form the whole organism, which is a human. In order to go over the tissues, first remember that we start here from chemical to cells to tissues. So now this is what we're about to discuss. So for tissues, remember you have in general 4 major specialized tissues in your body, starting with the epithelial tissues. We're going to have connective tissue, we're going to have muscle tissue, and we're going to have the nervous tissue. And the reason it's established like this is because it's in order of layers. Remember, I always compare the body as like a pool, right? From the surface to the most deep structures, right? So we start in this way. So the epithelial tissue is going to be located closer to the surface. Connective tissue is going to be on the second level. Muscle tissue is going to be deeper to the connective tissue. And in the case of the nervous system, it's going to be spread throughout these layers. So let's begin with the epithelial tissue. First of all, some of the characteristics of these tissue is that the cells are bound closer together, and there's no intracellular space. Other characteristic of the epithelial tissue is that we can classify it depending on the layers and depending on the cell shape. For example, when we say layer, we refer as to simple layer, which is one single layer, stratified, which is 2 or more layers, and then there is the pseudo-stratified, which means false. In other words, it looks like it's two or more, but in reality it's just one. And so those are the layers. In terms of the cell shape, we're gonna have squamous epithelium, which means it's flat in appearance. We're gonna have cuboidal, which means it looks like a square. And we're gonna have columnar, which looks literally just like a column. An additional shape is gonna be the transitional, which means it can change the shape. Discussion break. Name the levels of organization and name the 4 types of tissue in the body. To show you a representation of each one of these epithelial tissues, here's an example. So when we say a simple squamous epithelium, we're just combining these two characteristics of a flat type of cell with just one single layer. And so that's known as simple squamous epithelium. We can have also simple cuboidal, which means it's just one layer of cells, but the appearance is like a square. And the same for columnar. We can have simple columnar by just having one single layer of columnar cells. Also, I mentioned that you can have stratified layers, right? Which means it's 2 or more. So if you would add a second layer right here of cells, then this becomes, instead of simple, it becomes stratified. Stratified. So stratified squamous. The same here. And the same here. Now keep in mind that in order to name these layers and these tissues, you're gonna have to take a look at the first layer. The first layer is the one that tells you what type of tissue do you have in here. That happens especially for this simple columnar. The simple columnar typically is your first layer, the one that looks more columnar. But then the second layer, from the second layer down, is gonna look more cuboidal, for example, than columnar. Anyways, it's still known as simple columnar because your first layer, like I said, is columnar. The second tissue we're going to talk about is the connective tissue. For this one, remember, connective means it literally connects. So some of the functions of this connective tissue is to establish the structural framework of the body. It also transports fluids and materials. It also protects your organs and supports, surrounds, and connects other tissue together. And last but not least, it also stores energy and defends the body from microorganisms. So some examples of your connective tissue, you're going to have, for example, loose connective tissue, dense connective tissue. You're going to have fluid connective tissue such as blood and lymph. You're going to have cartilage and bones. The third type of tissue is muscle, and for this one, muscle tissue, it literally is going to contract and relax in order to move. Some of the characteristics is going to be that the cytoplasm is also known as the sarcoplasm, and the cell membrane, we call it the sarcolemma. Some examples of these muscle tissue is going to be the skeletal muscle. And as the word implies, skeletal means that it connects with your skeletal system, your bones, in order to move. And the characteristics of the skeletal muscle is that it's striated and is voluntary, meaning that you can control it. The second type of muscle is the cardiac muscle. And the cardiac muscle, it also is striated, but is involuntary, meaning that you cannot control it. And the third type of muscle is called smooth. Smooth muscle, it's non-striated, and it's also involuntary. And so some of the difference between these muscles is that, for example, your skeletal muscle, like I said, it's found on together with your skeletal system. Your cardiac muscle is only located in your heart, and your smooth muscle is located, for example, in your blood vessels or your digestive system. And last but not least, we have the nervous tissue. In your nervous tissue, we're going to have a tissue that is highly specialized to conduct electrical signals throughout the body. It essentially controls all of your body. These are the longest cells of your body as well, and they are incapable of cell reproduction or have little but no reproduction. It consists of several parts. For example, we're gonna have two types of neural cells. These are the neurons and neuroglia. Going back to the parts, the neurons have these dendrites, which are for receiving information, the soma, which is the same as the cell body, and the axon, which is there to send an information to another cell. It could be another neuron or another cell of the body, like your muscles. Last but not least, in here we mentioned the neuroglias, and the neuroglias are there as supporting cells of the neural tissue, and these also protect your neurons. And that's it for today.
Well, that's it for this video, and thank you for watching.